Hello and welcome to Basic Bits and Pieces Biology Lesson 5. Today's lesson we're going to talk about the scientific method and about experimentation. Let's go ahead and get started. So, what is the scientific method itself? It's a series of procedures which allow for the formulation, testing, and modification of hypotheses or a hypothesis. So, an experiment discusses results and draws conclusions. The experiment setup identifies variables and predicts outcomes. The observation drives both of these things. It's where you research the question or discover the question and draw a hypothesis. So we're going to talk about each of these. Remember, experimentation comes after observation. The observation leads us to believe that something may always be true, and we want to check to see if it is always true. So, a research question. Questions which are formed after observation. So, an example would be, why does metal rust when exposed to water? Or, do all dogs bark at cats? These would be research questions. We're going to conduct an experiment to see if these things are always true. An hypothesis would be a proposed explanation based on limited evidence. Hypotheses can be true or false. So, seeds always sprout when soaked in water. This could be true, this could be false. But this is our hypothesis. This is what we believe. It's a statement. And after experimentation, we can either reject our hypothesis, say it is not true, or it is not always so, or we can accept our hypothesis and say, from our experimentation, it seems that this is true. So a prediction. Our prediction is a judgment of the results based on the experiment. A prediction can be right or wrong, and they must be related to the hypothesis. So, an example would be, plants will always grow better in the presence of light. Cats will never learn new tricks. And so, we would have to conduct many experiments to see if this is true. And so, for the first example, plants will always grow better in light. Our research question will be, do plants need the sun to survive? Our hypothesis would be all plants need the sun to survive. And then our prediction would be plants will always grow better in the presence of light. And we would set up an experiment to see if this is true. We would have to test many different types of plants, and we would have to test them in many different conditions to see if they would always grow better in the presence of light. So variables. When conducting an experiment, the scientist must identify the variables. The independent variable is the one that is changed by the scientist. When the independent variable is changed, it affects the dependent variable. In order to prove that the experiment is valid, a scientist picks a control variable, which is also known as a constant. The constant never changes. So an example, if we wanted to measure how long it takes to melt a candle, the measure of time in seconds is the independent variable because we control how long the candle is lit. The height of the candle, measured in centimeters, is the dependent variable because it depends on how long the candle burns. So the longer that the candle is lit, the more it is burned. The constant would be to use the same type of candle, the same height and thickness, and type of wax every time you conduct the experiment. Validity and reliability are two very important things in academic studies. To say that an experiment is valid, the experiment must be measuring the correct variables. To say that it is accurate, the results of the experiment must be more or less the same. To say that the experiment is reliable, this is very close to accuracy, the experiment must be repeatable and consistent. Science is based on observation and experimentation. A true experiment is always repeatable. Ethics in experimentation. In order to be a good scientist, there are basic ethical rules to follow. These include acknowledging the works of others and respecting other scientists. We are not the first people to think of these things, and it's important to go look to see what other scientists have said. Respecting the dignity of living things and causing them no harm. We've discussed this before, but all living things are deserving of our respect. We should respect them as living things and never intend to cause harm. We want to know about behaviors, we want to know about characteristics, but we don't want to purposely harm or maim or kill a living thing. Obtaining permission from the proper authority to experiment or to observe. Sometimes we can experiment or observe in our own homes. Other times we might want to go observe the monkeys at the zoo and conduct an experiment on them. If we were to do that, we would need permission to conduct the experiment. Observation, we would just need permission to be in the zoo. Experimentation, we would need permission from the zookeepers and from the zoo themselves. To always ensure the privacy and well-being of the research subjects. So if the research subject is human, we have to maintain privacy. We always have to maintain the well-being, human and non-human, and to practice safe habits in observation and experimentation. It should go without saying that we should not put ourselves or others in harm's way when observing or experimenting. However, scientists in the past have done things that would cause them to be harmed. So we must make sure that we keep our safety and the safety of others at the forefront of our thoughts. Alright, so now we're on to the experiment. An experiment is a test or procedure to make a scientific discovery or to test a hypothesis. So our experiment that we discussed earlier is to see if a candle always burns at the same rate. And the scientists could light several of the same types of candles and then measure them at specific times to see if they are all burning at the same rate. And then results. If the prediction is correct, then the hypothesis is supported. If the prediction is incorrect, then the hypothesis is not supported. And we would take the results of this and publish them in our conclusion. So in our conclusion, we state the findings of the experiment, we write a report, we modify the hypothesis if necessary, and repeat the scientific method with the new hypothesis as needed. We look toward a new research question. Sometimes we may discover during the course of our research that we were asking the wrong question. So just as a recap, the introduction would include the research question, hypothesis, and prediction. The materials and method is the design of the experiment, the variables, and the experiment itself. The conclusion is the results, further discussion, and conclusion. This is the scientific method, and most scientific experiments will follow this method more or less. It helps us to keep our experiments reliable and precise. That's all we have today, so thank you for having this lesson with basic bits and pieces. Have a great day.